Okay, so what could Peterson improve upon? Okay, so first of all, I have watched nearly everything Peterson has done. I've read his books. I'm getting to the point where I can actually almost, if somebody asks me a question about what Peterson would think about a particular topic, I could probably have a really good educated guess as to what his opinion would be. So I've read Maps of Meaning, I've read 12 Rules, I've watched his Maps of Meaning courses 3 times, like all 3 years, and then I've watched his psychology courses. I'm pretty familiar with how the guy thinks. I've watched his interviews with all sorts of, comedians like Russell Brand, Theo Vaughn, Joe Rogan. I've also watched his political interviews, and I've watched his interviews with Sam Harris. Those I watched multiple times, and I've watched some of his older interviews with before he even ascended to popularity. So I'm pretty familiar with the guy, and I feel like I'm in a good spot where I could actually, first of all, give him some feedback that I think that he may not be getting anywhere else. Okay, so one of the things he says is, well, if you want to get good feedback, you should get it from your enemies. Well, I'm a friend, I'm a fan, and I feel like his enemies are failing him and giving him good feedback, because a lot of it is just not very good feedback. It's just motivated by tearing the guy down rather than actually, and I'm not saying it's all like that, but most of it, I would say, is designed to systematically tear the guy down without any concern for what the truth is. So yeah, the first thing I would say about something he should do, I think he should just stop doing interviews. And what I mean by that, he can be the interviewee. He's great at being the interviewee. But if he's actually conducting the interview, I would say that winds up being extraordinarily uninteresting to me. And if you don't know what if you don't know what I mean, go watch his interview with Milo Yiannopoulos. Now, whatever you think about Milo Yiannopoulos, I don't know if I have an opinion either way. The opinion I would have is that he's an extremely interesting, complicated person. And what wound up happening is it was just like this focus on this just one element of what happened in Milo's life for about an hour and a half. And you could tell even Milo didn't want to talk about it because he lost interest. And and it was just not that fascinating. So I think he should either stop doing those types of interviews where he's interviewing someone, or I guess learn what make them more complicated. Make them more like interesting. But but generally he's an extraordinarily, if somebody's asking him questions, he's extraordinarily good at making that fascinating and interesting. So the other thing I would say, and this is something you see in the Kathy Newman interview, and most prominently I would say in the GQ interview. I love watching those videos. But I can also tell this, that he's not going to convince anybody on the other side to go his direction. That's the point of doing it. Because the intellectual conversation is happening and he's winning, right? But that doesn't really matter because on the one hand you have, I don't know her name, but in the GQ interview, you have that person has a view, Jordan Peterson has a view, and then she's being negative to him to basically, try and bring him down to her level. And I feel like, and that's like an energy thing. Like, he's at this level of energy when he goes and talks to people that, at his events, and you can watch him in his element there, and that level of energy is so extraordinarily positive that I think if he could maintain that in an interview, he could sort of coax people up from the other side, not just with intellect, because they're not operating necessarily on intellect, right? They're operating on unconscious biases that the only way you're going to convince somebody is by bringing a positive energy, maybe having a little bit of humor in there. But, you know, overall, I think he handles that pretty well. I would say that if he could maintain a positive energy and sort of try and coax people up without concern for how the interviewer is sort of behaving, I think that would be far better for recruiting people to what I would view as a more balanced understanding of life. Because ultimately what you have is a lot of the time is you got these, you know, you got, on the one hand you got radical feminists, and on the other hand you have guys like in the MRA, you got guys in MGTOW, and what's interesting is that they're both telling things that are true. They were both saying things that are true, but it's the energy it's coming from. And if Peterson could maintain an energy, and I know this is probably leagues harder than, you know, than it seems when you're just saying it. I mean, it's easier said than done. That's my point. But I think that would be a point of improvement, I would say, where that would have a tremendous positive impact if he could manage that. The other thing I would think that I'd like to see is some more content related to Freud and trauma theory. I feel like he underemphasizes Freud. I think he's far advanced beyond that point, that he's forgotten what it was like to be at these points where you haven't integrated certain elements. So in other words, you know, Freud had these, you know, sort of trauma theory, and he had the, you know, what Jung called the parental imago. I'm not sure if Freud called it that, but Freud sort of thought that your parents were the primary cause of neurosis. And I would like to see some more content related to disengaging from that unconscious, or sort of integrating that into your consciousness, so that, you know, because I think he's done that, but he's just hasn't taught it. I mean, you even go through his psychology lectures and you find that he isn't necessarily talking a lot. He almost skips over Freud. And I think a lot of people would benefit from hearing Freud's theory, because I'd say the vast majority of people aren't going to therapy and hearing about these types of things. So the other thing I would say, this is to me the most important. I would say he's a little bit biased against atheists and a little bit biased towards fundamentalists, okay? And here's why I think that. I think if he's engaging with an atheist, then what's going to happen is he's going to actually engage with the arguments, right? He's going to actually criticize to the full extent of his ability what could potentially be a destructive ideology, or let's just say suboptimal ideology. On the other hand, I think he's biased towards fundamentalists, and who knows, maybe he has reasons for that. And I'm sure he does. But I just don't think that he understands that there's a lot of people in the population that have gone through a fundamentalist system that could really benefit from a generous critique of fundamentalism. Because there's a lot of people who have denied it just because, you know, for whatever reason, they've denied it, but they haven't found something else. And that's what sort of Peterson's sort of trying to craft, is sort of an alternative that integrates both science and religion into one cohesive viewpoint. So what I'd like to see is when he goes to Liberty University, or, you know, has somebody, say he gets interviewed by John MacArthur. I don't think that'll ever happen. But I'd like to see more of a intellectual critique of what they're teaching. Because I think he's sort of kind of tiptoed around that and sort of tried to ally himself with fundamentalist Christians because they're really nice most of the time. And then atheists are kind of mean. So he goes a little bit easy on the fundamentalists, and I would say he goes a little bit, I wouldn't say he goes hard on the atheists. You know, the last thing he did with Sam Harris was quite good in my estimation. I mean, I think he did an extraordinary job. I think Sam Harris did a good job too, by the way. And yeah, I see the levels of truth in what everybody says. What I like Peterson is I see the most truth in what he's saying. In terms of like the intellectual elite or the intellectual dark web. I think he's the one he's at the top of the hierarchy in my mind when it comes to intellectual matters. And I'd just like to see him be a little bit less shy about criticizing Christianity. And I know what he's concerned about to some extent. I know he's concerned that that'll throw people into a pit of despair, but that might be a necessary thing for a lot of people that are interested. Now, people who aren't interested, they'll just like blow right past it. They won't even engage intellectually. But people that actually need to hear it will hear it. And I think that'll help them. So yeah, that would be a sort of an overview of what I think Peterson could do better. And I hope he finds this and gets a lot of value from it. You know, in terms of me garnering value or anybody else garnering value, I hope this helps me reduce the amount of divinity that I put on him. You know, I watched the Liberty University video where he goes to a Christian college, and there was somebody that went up on stage and just started crying for help for Peterson. And what I think a lot of people don't understand is that your ability to help yourself is primarily within. You have all these resources that you don't have access to, but you're holding the key to the lock, and that's what Jung talks about. He talks about alchemy, and you're sort of the alchemist of your own life in that sense. And so yeah, I hope this can serve to reduce the sort of messiah complex or guru complex that people have surrounding Peterson, and then sort of move it into the necessary balance. Because when it comes down to it, he's just a person that has really excelled in life and optimized his love, his purpose and his meaning. But there's no reason that anybody else that desires to do that can't do that. So, but I fear that that's what will happen if people don't realize that what's unconsciously happening. So those are the two reasons I think I'm doing this video. And I know, you know, people might not like it, but I also think that, you know, if you think that 100% of what anybody says or does is perfect, well, you're probably an idiot, and you want to avoid that too. So, so anyway, have a good day. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time.